Hello folks, I'm Esther Emery and today you're watching my personal channel. For me it's a Thursday, which means that I'm going to be telling a story, perhaps combined with telling some things that I think or some things that I believe. Feel free to make yourself comfortable or even find some chore to work on to keep yourself busy, because I'm just going to sit here and talk. And today's story, believe it or not, takes place in New York City. I've had kind of an intense relationship with New York City, the city, because of my childhood as a rural person. I think any person whose identity is really strongly bound to country living has a bit of a push-pull with the bright lights of the city. And when I was 15, I got to visit New York City for the first time. It was actually that same year that I was on an airplane for the first time. So my horizons were rapidly expanding. And both my oldest brother, Dan, and my second oldest sister, Becca, lived in New York City at the time. My brother, Dan, had married into a New York family, actually the suburbs north of New York City. And I married into some affluence, which was another fascination, to say the least. My sister-in-law's family intimidates me and also had a great draw for me because they represented urban intelligence and affluence and essentially a set of values very different from the ones that I had been raised with. There was one particular member of my sister-in-law's family who took on a larger-than-life identity for me. Her name is Alexandra. She's still very much alive. She was a Jewish woman of maturity. We certainly will not say older. She's still quite young. But someone with the status of having a few years on her. And also an author. Someone who had written a book. Sparkling conversation, wit, capacity to speak about any number of things, especially world affairs. Alexandra, and I just thought the world of her as a 15-year-old, and in fact still do. So some years later, I was at a gathering, and I'm going to say it was Thanksgiving, because certainly it wasn't a Christmas, and in fact I would have noticed if it were a particularly Jewish holiday, so I'm going to guess that it was Thanksgiving, and my sister-in-law was hosting, and Alexandra was there, and we had a wonderful, delicious, to me, very fancy meal, and after the meal, I got up to do the dishes, and Alexandra said, "You Emerys are the workingest family I've ever seen. Always dishes, dishes, dishes. Every time I come over, everybody wants to do the dishes." And I thought, oh my gosh, I have this wrong. I've been doing too many dishes all my life to be like Alexandra. I'm going to have to value sitting in the parlor after dinner, having conversation. Well, this is a bit of a switch for me, because if my mother had any skill, it was her sheer force of determination and willingness to work. My mother would say, where there's a will, there's a way, and she would just tackle what needed to be done, and she would just go at it and go at it and go at it until it was done. And because of that, my family, my childhood was filled with good memories of work, hard physical work, and especially dishes. My childhood memories of holidays I hardly even remember the meals. I remember cooking them, and I remember cleaning up after them. But the part where you eat them was not our favorite part. And we sang, "We ain't got a barrel of money, maybe we're ragged and funny." We sang we had this attitude of gleeful, joyful poverty and appreciating the work of our hands. I can trace it back to that Thanksgiving with Alexandra, when I thought to myself, if I want the life of the mind, if I value the life of the mind, if I want to be urban and sophisticated and intelligent and affluent, I am going to have to stop doing the dishes. Well, I've done all sorts of thinking since that Thanksgiving with Alexandra. I've done a lot of thinking about how to be efficient and how to be healthy and how to get what you want and how to live a life that's sustainable and authentic and helps you to live out your compassionate heart and the values that you hold most dear. And I think that there's a thread to be split here between just being a hard worker or being not a hard worker. The the line that as a teenager seemed to be so clear between the people who do menial work and the people who don't do menial work, it turns out is much more complicated. To bring it full circle, I had a comment on one of my very popular videos the other day saying it's a shame that work is such a dirty word. And I thought, oh, you need to get to know us a little bit better. These days I'm teaching my children chores. I'm teaching my children to love chores. I'm teaching them to sing while they work. I'm teaching them to enjoy each other's company while they work. I'm teaching them to even be very slightly competitive about how they work so that nobody ever thinks to themselves that the person who works the least is the winner. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want them to be able to move through life with all their limbs in play. I want them to be able to move through life doing everything that they can do to achieve what their heart feels is the right thing to do. I don't think work is a dirty word. I do think that efficiency sometimes can frame work so that it's successful work instead of a cage. In a mechanized post-industrial society, work is a kind of a cage. Work is a cage which restricts our capacity to imagine what exists outside of that work. So if we are limited to a life producing widgets or a life purchasing widgets, which is another kind of work, then we are limited to a treadmill, right? A hamster wheel, if you will. We're just walking over the same ground and we don't have the time or energy to expand beyond that. So I do want to say thank you to Alexandra and to all the other people who have helped me to expand the life of the mind. Imagine what lives beyond my kind of hyperventilating urgency of doing the next thing and the next thing required for what I imagine to be my work. But also, as the mind is liberated, as we imagine, okay, so what would be the best place for me to put my energy? There's no way to accomplish it without letting the fingers and the arms and all the limbs be fully engaged without fear, fully engaged in the work without fear. And I do think there's something that may happen to everyone, but I think particularly to women, where we retract some of our capacity. We kind of hold back a little bit for various reasons that all have to do with some kind of fear. We say, oh, I'm not going to give my whole energy to that because I'm protecting some corner of my heart from failure, or because I'm protecting some other person who's near me from the extent of my capacities. I'm hobbling myself because I don't want to cause offense. I don't want to ruin things. I don't want to make people mad. I don't want to fail. So I had to find, this is the threads I'm picking apart. I had to go back in and pick it apart and say to myself, I want to be someone who has that mental freedom, that ability to look at a situation and say, okay, I want to do the dishes with my family because this is my culture. We sing while we do the dishes, and this is the culture of the Western pioneers. And we may have other things about our family culture that are extremely problematic, but this value of hard work is something that I want to pass on, and I want to let people know is something that I appreciate and think is important. And also, I want to encourage my children to never be caught on that treadmill of hard work, to never be unable to rest, never be unable to take a breath and stop and do what really is the basis of any kind of worship and the basis of any kind of soul healing, to be able to stop, to be able to take in, to be able to appreciate all the things that Alexandra was rightly suggesting I failed to do after that Thanksgiving dinner. So wherever you're listening to me today, I hope that you can find the push and the pull between throwing yourself fully into the work when it needs to be done and also having the capacity, the courage really, to rest when rest is the right thing to do. I'm Esther Emery. Thanks for hanging out with me this week.